guys, it's that time of the week again and we are back for our championship score predictions. Let's hop into this one. So guys, Happy New Year. I hope that everyone's doing really well. Let me know in the comments down below. But we are back again for our championship score predictions. 2021 and the championship is just coming at us relentlessly. So as always, do get your thoughts and score predictions in the comments down below for a chance to be involved in the next video. Before we do jump into anything though, I must give a big shout out to our sponsors over at OneFootball. So if you've not already, heading into 2021, if you want to find a place to stay on top of everything that is going on around the footballing world, OneFootball is the place to go ahead and do that. We got the January transfer window, which is now open. We're going to be having loads of transfer rumour videos coming out throughout the month, but if you want to get live updates to your phone whenever there's a new rumour floating about or whenever a goal goes in, OneFootball is the place to stay on top of everything. And before we do hop into my championship predictions for this weekend, I will include your guys' score predictions on screen now, so if any of you guys did successfully manage to get any of your predictions correct last time round, then your name will be included on screen. Now, I managed to have a decent week, to be fair. I got 3 of mine spot on. I got Huddersfield, Blackburn, Rotherham, Barnsley and Luton, Bristol City all spot on. But the big shout out needs to go to Championship HQ for being the only person to correctly predict Norwich 1, QPR 1. If we take a look to the side of me, what that means for the main prediction league heading into 2021, I am still solidly in that 3rd place at this point in time. Like I said, decent game week for me, picking up 10 points. And this is what the League 1 table is looking like. We do have some new entries in here, so if you guys aren't on that league yet, just keep leaving your score predictions in the comments down below. I'm sure you'll be on there in no time. But without any further ado guys, let's jump into this one. So let's start out with tonight's game, and you're going to need to get your score predictions in quite swiftly for this one because it's a 5:30 kickoff. But we got Sheffield Wednesday going up against Derby now. This game just got even more interesting as both sides picked up 3 points in midweek, both with really good performances. Derby, I think that sort of performance was coming, especially over the last few weeks, and I mean they absolutely went for it against Birmingham and they got their rewards for that, you know, putting 4 goals past them and some really nice attacking play in that game. And they probably felt a little bit undone with what happened against Preston, obviously losing in the last minute, so they put all that energy into the game in midweek and they were absolutely fantastic. Sheffield Wednesday was a result which, I'm going to be completely honest with you, I didn't see coming in midweek whatsoever. Middlesbrough, really consistent performer so far this season, but Sheffield Wednesday actually took the game to them, especially in the first half, and that's something that we've not really seen all too much of them doing so far this season. And we mentioned it a couple of videos ago. These next couple of weeks for Sheffield Wednesday now are absolutely massive because their next 3 games are up against Derby, Coventry and Wycombe. If they come out of that group of fixtures with a decent amount of points, it will set them very well for the rest of the season. But if they lose all 3 of them, going to be in a really sticky situation. For a score prediction, I can't separate these. I'm going to go for a draw, I think. I'm going to go for a 1-1. FIFA's going to agree with me. If I had to sway either way, I'd probably be going to Derby because I think they've got a little bit more consistency about them. But Sheffield Wednesday, you'd think would take quite a bit of confidence from that game in midweek, so I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Then moving on into Saturday's fixtures, we got Birmingham going up against Blackburn. Now, neither side's on a particularly great run of form at the moment. Birmingham especially are, I mean, at home especially, how many goals they're conceding. They've lost their last 2 home matches with an aggregate score of 8-1. That sort of thing can't continue, and up against this Blackburn side who have taken advantage of pretty weak defences so far this season, this could be an ideal game for Blackburn at this point of the season where they're in need of a little bit of a kickstart for the second half of the season. I feel like it was another disappointing performance in midweek as they lost against Huddersfield. Defensively, they're having a few issues at the moment. They've not kept a clean sheet now in their last 9 matches. So a game up against this Birmingham side who seem to be really low on confidence, especially at the back. You know, Neil Etheridge, I don't know what's happened to him over the last few weeks, but if Blackburn score early especially, it is one where this could potentially get out of hand because, like I say, with some of the creative players that Blackburn have got, I know they're not particularly on the greatest run of form at the moment individually themselves, but a game like this could completely get them back on it. So score prediction time, I'm going to go 3-1 Blackburn, with FIFA saying it'll be a 1-1 draw. Next up we then go to Brentford up against Bristol City. Now with Bristol City, there is still this feeling of inconsistency about them. It's a squad which is good enough to be challenging in and around the top 6, and I think they will be floating around this area for the majority of the season, but can they put together another consistent run's the question you ask of this squad. Obviously, it was a loss in midweek against this Luton side. It's going to be a tough game in this one, up against this Brentford side who's on an absolutely fantastic unbeaten run at the moment. You know, the last time they lost in the championship, you're going all the way back to October. The game they had in midweek as well, I feel like that was a big test that they passed against Bournemouth, coming from a goal behind in that game. Brilliant game to watch, by the way. Some wonderful football was on display for this one. Attacking, both teams really going for it, but second half Brentford really turned it on. Brandon Beamer's involvement for the second goal was just absolutely wonderful. Some great footwork to beat his man and then delivers that ball brilliantly in. So for a score prediction, I think a have got to be going for Brentford. I think that with Norwich dropping points recently as well, it's made the top of the Championship even more interesting. Like, Brentford are within 3 points of Norwich now, which we didn't see happening a few weeks ago when Norwich looked like they'd absolutely run away with things. So, score prediction time, I'm going to go 2-0 Brentford in this one, and FIFA's going to agree with me. Then we head into Huddersfield up against Reading. Now, this game comes at an interesting time of the season. Reading are trying to solidify their place in the top 6 at the moment. They've got quite a few teams who are looking to sneak in behind them, but decent point for them in midweek against Swansea. Goalless draw in that one. They're slowly starting to get first team players back into the squad. John Swift featured off the bench in that one as well, and there is a possibility that Lucas João could feature for this one. I saw a stat that João and Mate, up until the point where they got injured, had scored 66% of Reading's goals this season. So obviously, taking those two players out of the team, it was always going to be a bit of an inconsistent run that Reading have gone on. But 4 points from their last 2 matches is a decent return, all things considered. Now they're going up against this Huddersfield side, who will be a real test for them, I have a feeling. Huddersfield's home record lately has been really impressive. They've won their last 5 home matches, and they played some difficult teams during that run as well. They've also kept 3 clean sheets in their last 5 home matches. So I get the impression this one's going to be quite the tight game, really. First goal, I think, is quite a big one. Wouldn't be all too surprised to see this one finishing as a draw. FIFA's backing Reading for a 1-0, so I'll go the other way and back Huddersfield for a 1-0. After that, we go to Luton up against QPR. Luton getting back to winning ways in midweek with 3 points against Bristol City. QPR, decent point on the road, all things considered, against Norwich, and to be honest, it could have been all 3 if Asai Samuel didn't miss that gilt-edged chance he had right at the end of that game. The ball was fizzed across the box. It actually looked harder to miss, but he had that chance blaze over the crossbar, and I suppose what could have been for QPR in that game. But QPR now have a decent run of fixtures coming up where they need to string together some consistent performances and start to pick up some results, because QPR have been that side we've been talking about as the potential team that could be dragged into this relegation battle. I think the point in midweek was big for them, especially with a lot of the other teams below them picking up wins in midweek. It was quite a big one for teams at the bottom of the Championship. But Luton aren't to be taken lightly. At home so far this season, they've been really strong, on a really good run there at the moment. They've only lost 2 matches at home, and QPR on the road themselves this season haven't particularly been all too consistent. They've only won 1 away match this far into the season. If they can take that same sort of desire they had in that Norwich game, you know, defensively they stood up really strong to the test in that one, then they could well get something from this game. But I think for a consistent basis, I'm just swaying towards Luton for this one. I'm going to go 2-1 to the home side, with Thief saying it'll be 1-0 QPR. Next up we go to the Den as Millwall go up against Coventry. Millwall back in Championship action now after having a few game weeks off, so they're obviously playing catch up with the rest of the league now. It's an interesting one because you don't quite know which level Millwall are going to come back at. You know, will the break have done them good with that little bit of rest, or will they be lacking a little bit of match sharpness? I suppose you can look at it from both angles. Still, one of the most surprising stats for me so far this season is that Millwall have only won 1 match at home so far this season, which, I mean, if you look back on their records throughout the past few seasons in the Championship, the home form was always like the bread and butter thing that they relied on, but this season it's sort of been flipped on its head. Now, Coventry were involved in action in midweek. They did lose against Preston. To be honest, I think that Coventry would have been really frustrated with that one, because up until Preston scored the first goal, Coventry were absolutely all over us, and the goal sort of came against the run of play. It was a silly mistake they made defensively. I think both goals they conceded, actually, you know, neither of the goals came from Preston sort of out footballing Coventry. They were just sort of sloppy mistakes they were making at the back, which has been a little bit of a rarity for them lately. Defensively they have been pretty strong, but for a score prediction in this one, I don't think there's going to be all too much in it. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw, and Thief is going to agree with me for that one. After that we go to Norwich up against Barnsley. Lots surrounding this game at the moment. Now, Barnsley have had a couple of players test positive for COVID-19, and so there's a possibility that this one could be getting called off, but as of recording, the game will be going ahead. So the 2 players that have tested positive, I believe, are Alex Mowatt and Bradley Collins, and then they'll also be missing George Miller and Connor Chaplin, who are in close contact with those 2 players. Now, the big miss for Barnsley from that group of players is obviously going to be Alex Mowatt. He was on the score sheet in midweek as Barnsley won yet again. That's now 5 wins from their last 6 matches. 2-1 against Rotherham, 2 early goals from Alex Mowatt and Corley Woodrow were enough for the 3 points in that one. And Barnsley really are chipping away this season and edging closer up the table week by week. This one's going to be a test. Norwich have dropped a few points in their last couple of matches. The game against QPR midweek seemed like a really frustrating one, obviously. That ruled out Todd Cantwell goal seemed to be like a big moment of the match, and then the 2 penalties late on as well. And obviously it's been a tiny blip on Norwich's season so far. They've dropped points in their last 2 matches, but even with that, that's allowed some of the other teams below them to catch up to them. You know, Brentford are just 1 win away from them now, and so that's going to, you know, continue to crank up the pressure, and this Barnsley side is going to come with a lot of energy. Now, the players that they're missing obviously will be a bit of a miss. miss, but I think Barnsley will give this one a really good go, and with Norwich not completely being 100% at it at the moment, I can see this one being a really lively match. I'm going to go for an entertaining 2-2 draw, with FIFA saying it'll be 1-0 Barnsley. Next up we go to Deep Dell as Preston face off against Nottingham Forest. Now each side's on a reasonable run of form at the moment. Preston, for the first time this season probably, have been able to string together a series of decent results, so we've won our last 3 matches. Now the performance levels haven't been exceptionally high, but we're doing enough to win matches at the moment, and probably the biggest thing from a Preston fan's perspective is the clean sheets recently. Now at the start of the season we couldn't keep a clean sheet to save our lives, but 3 consecutive clean sheets now. I think that will breed a bit of confidence coming into the new year. Nottingham Forest themselves, the best way to describe them at the moment would probably be to say they're just sort of grinding out the matches at the moment. They're not per se the most entertaining side to watch at this point in time. They probably need a few more goals to their play, but they are picking up points and they're just about doing enough to stay above that dotted line at the moment. A point in midweek against Stoke's a decent result, all things considered. The opening goal they conceded was a bit of a howler, but to get back into that game, you know, not all too many teams are going to pick up points at Stoke this season. They've been a good team at home, so decent point there, all things considered. And going into this one, I see this one being a fairly low scorer, to be honest with you. Obviously Preston won in midweek 2-0 against Coventry. We weren't the greatest in that game, but we managed to pounce on 2 sort of sloppy defensive mistakes, so if there is anything of that nature by Forest, I expect we will pounce on it. But for a score prediction, I'm going to go for a draw. You know, I can't separate these two in this one. I'm going to go for a 1-1, with FIFA saying it'll be 2-0 North End. Next up we go to Rotherham up against Cardiff. Now neither side's on a particularly great run of form at the moment. Cardiff losing in midweek against Wycombe. You feel like that's quite the damning result there for Neil Harris, who at one point of the season seemed to have the formula for Cardiff. They obviously started out really slowly, had that series of fixtures where there's a bit of an upturn in their form, but recently they've completely fallen off a cliff again. They're going up against this Rotherham side who they themselves aren't particularly on a great run of form at the moment. They've slipped into the bottom 3 now and need to start pulling out results from somewhere. What's been frustrating for Rotherham recently, in a lot of the games they've been losing, conceding goals early on into matches, so just not being switched on early enough. In 3 of their last 4 defeats they've conceded at least 1 goal in the opening 15 minutes, and that leaves them then chasing the game, looking to get back into it, and that sort of goes against their game plan. You know, what served Rotherham so well at the start of the season was being this side who was tough to break down, tough to beat, and they'd nick a goal here and there. When they leave themselves too exposed at the back early on into matches, it just makes it far too easy for the opposition. So tough game to predict this one, with neither side particularly playing well, but I think I'm just going to go for Cardiff to bounce back. I'm going to go 2-1 to the away side. Rotherham seem to be losing one too many of these tight matches at the moment, whereas FIFA saying it'll be a 1-1 draw. Next up we go to the Liberty as Swansea face off against Reading. Now there's not been all too much between these two sides so far this season, just 3 points separates them in the league, with Watford having the game in hand. Obviously Watford will have had that extra bit of recovery with them not being in action in midweek, so that could potentially play into their hands a little bit. Obviously the new manager's had a little bit more time to work on the training pitch with this Watford side, so they're a tough side to gauge at the moment, Watford, really, aren't they? Because obviously they won their first match under their new manager on Boxing Day, beat Norwich 1-0 with one of the few real chances they had in that match, but clinical I think is what you can say about them. But they're going up against a Swansea side who don't give a lot away to the opposition. It was a goalless draw in midweek against Reading. I can see this game being a similar one to Swansea's game against Bournemouth that also finished as a goalless draw. I don't see many goals particularly being scored in this one. Obviously Watford away from home so far this season have been fairly inconsistent so far, but for a score prediction, I think that extra recovery may just edge it for Watford. I'm going to go 1-0 Watford, with FIFA saying it'll be 2-0 Watford. Very interesting to see the outcome of that one, because listen, if Swansea win that game, it's really on for them this season from then on, isn't it? Next up we then go to Wycombe up against Middlesbrough. Now in midweek the form book was sort of flipped on its head really. A lot of the sides nearer to the bottom of the championship picked up big results. Wycombe obviously beating Cardiff, it wasn't enough to get them off the bottom of the table, but 3 points in that game does keep them competitive and within touching distance of getting out the bottom 3. What we've been most critical of Wycombe of so far this season on this sort of winless run that they were on prior to the game in midweek was giving away cheap goals, silly mistakes at the back here and there, because they were always competitive in all the matches they were playing. It was just those fine margins that were letting them down. So if they can build on the back of that performance with another one against this Borough side who did lose in midweek, they may be onto something. Middlesbrough, quite disappointing really up against that Wednesday side who had previously parted company with Tony Pulis. It seemed like a bit of a shambles there and a good time to be playing Sheffield Wednesday, but it just didn't happen for them at all, did it? Will they bounce back in this one is the question. I think so far this season Borough seem to have decent bounce back ability. I'm thinking thinking back to that game they had against Northend at Deepdale, where it was a bit of a horror show away from home. After that, they bounced back really well. I think that this could be another similar occurrence when they go on a little bit of a run. So I'm going to go 2-1 Middlesbrough, with FIFA saying it'll be 1-0 Wycombe. And then to finish things off for today, we got Stoke going up against Bournemouth. Quite an interesting game to finish on, really. Like we mentioned it before, Bournemouth were involved in this fantastically enthralling game in midweek. They just lost out against Brentford in the end, but I mean, they themselves had their chances. You know, Pontus Jansson cleared one off the line. David Raya was popping up with save after the save, so they'll be looking to get back to winning ways in this one. But Stoke have been a resilient side lately who aren't losing a lot of football matches. They've drawn 4 out of their last 5, haven't they, Stoke now? It was another draw for them in midweek against Nottingham Forest. I think they're doing quite well at the moment. They're continuing to grind out the performances with all the injuries that they've currently got accumulated. They're still staying competitive in and around the top half of the Championship. They're just a whiskers away from the top 6 at the moment. And then in terms of Bournemouth, away from home, quite a few of their games have ended as draws so far this season. So you'd be a bit of a fool to back against Stoke playing at home with their record there so far this season. So for a prediction in this one, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Two quite clashing styles, so it's a tough one to say who will come out on top with that one, but I'll go for a 1-1 draw. FIFA same, it'll be 1-0 Stoke. But guys, there we have it. That will now wrap it up for today's video and the prediction video. So as always, if you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and get your score predictions in the comments down below for a chance to be involved in the next video and get yourself onto that prediction league. But apart from that, guys, thanks for sticking around. Make sure to subscribe for a bit of regular Championship content. But apart from that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.